Hey everybody! A couple people had emailed me with the question about tuning. What do you do if your instrument's out of tune? And I thought, what a great time for you to all learn how to tune. It's real easy when we're in school to just kind of hand it over to Mr. Sauter, and then I do it for you. But I think this kind of situation that we're in right now is a really great way for us to kind of focus on building autonomy and independence. And this is a really important skill. For all musicians to know. It takes time. It's not an easy skill to learn to do it well, but it's an easy skill to get the hang of. Like you will all be able to do this, and then you'll get better at it, I guess, as you go. So before we start, let me just make sure it's really clear for you. I'm using a violin today just because it fits in the video, but this is the same process for cellos and violas as well. Basses, yours is a little different, and I'll touch on that in just a moment, but some of the concepts will still apply to you. So real quickly, you have two ways that you tune your instrument, or two parts of the instrument that you use to tune, and it's the tuning pegs, which are up here, and then the fine tuners, which are down here. And you'll notice my instrument actually only has one, because most professional violins, they really only have a fine tuner on their E string, but when you're beginning an instrument, a lot of times they'll have a fine tuner on each one, so you have that ability to kind of adjust more closely. So let me just kind of frame it this way. I'm assuming most of you have used a microscope before, and when you're looking down into a microscope at your slide, the first thing you do is kind of get the scope to actually move up and down, and that is how you kind of narrow your focus a little bit. But then you use the other little part that it's called the fine tuner, or fine tuner maybe, I don't know. And you kind of turn it, and it clears up the picture even more. And that's the same idea here on your violin. So these are kind of your big motion, your first course of action to tune. And then the fine tuners are the thing that you use just to get a little closer and a little more accurate. So that's the first part. Before you tune, actually, let me kind of take a step back. Before you even tune, before you even try this, a couple of things to think about. Know which note you're trying to tune. So, for example, take a listen to my instrument. You'll notice the A string was really out of tune. And so right now I'm going to show you how to tune if there's only one string out of tune, which hopefully is the case. If there's multiple ones out of tune, I'll show you a trick for that as well. My A string is really out of tune. So I need to know that I'm working on my A string. And I think the easiest way to think about this is, hopefully you can see this. I hope it's not in reverse. It might be in reverse, but it's the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. The musical notes just move in a circle, right? And so, for example, I'm trying to tune my A string. And if I'm tuning, and I'll show you what I'm going to use in just a moment. If I'm tuning, and the information I'm getting back tells me it's a B, my B is too high. So that means I need to be thinking how to tune it lower. If my note tells me that it's a G, that means my string is too low, and I'm going to have to tune it up to make it higher in pitch. So really the only thing to get out of that is just make sure you know what notes are around the string you're tuning. So A will have B and G. C string for cellos and violas will have, if it's a D, it's too low. If it's a B, it's too high. Sorry, I said the opposite, didn't I? C string, if it's a D, it's too high. And if it's a B, it's too low. Same thing on an E string, you have F and D. On a G string, you have F and A. Just know which notes are around your instrument. This is really important to think about, especially in the early stages of tuning. The second thing to think about is here, let me show you. So the example here, I use an app called Soundcorset, and it looks like this. And it's a great idea to have an app. To be honest, I use my ears more often than not, but that's because I've been playing music for a long time. But every once in a while, I use an app, and it helps kind of reset my tuning and make sure I'm really, really clear. And the app works like a gauge. And so right now, for some reason, it's showing a B. Maybe that's the timbre of my voice. I don't know, the pitch of my voice. And every time I pluck a string, so for example, I'm going to try to do this with two hands somehow. So notice what happens. I'm going to pluck my A string. it's telling me it's an A flat, which means I'm a little low, so I'm going to have to tune my string up. But let's listen to like my G string. All right, so my G, you'll notice it kind of, I think it turns green. I hope you can see that. I can't tell if you can see that or not. You'll notice it turns green, and the little meter gauge thing is going to that middle 0 point. So it says 0 on it, and that tells me I'm right on. If my gauge is a little low, then I'm going to have to tune it up. If my gauge is a little high, I'm going to tune it up. But the big part to know here, so we talked about the tuning pegs and the fine tuners. The tuning pegs are going to get you so you have the right note. The fine tuners are probably going to be where, once you're close in that green range, maybe, once you're close, you can use the fine tuners to get even closer, okay? So you're ultimately trying to get to that 0 point. Okay, so that's what the app looks like. So the other thing to think about is how the tuning pegs are made. And I think the easiest way to show that is probably like this. So the tuning peg is shaped sort of like a tapered cone. So it looks sort of like this, where you have a smaller end on one side. And then it's going to go through the holes that are here on the side of the instrument. And it's really important to know, because if this is the hole, once the tuning peg goes in, at a certain point, it can't go any further because of the tapered part. However, if I'm tuning and it's too loose, it'll flop out, okay? So you want to try to keep that tension, it's called friction. You want to try to keep that friction just tight enough that the peg isn't going to slip, but not so tight that you can't turn it, okay? So these are kind of the things you have to learn through experience. And it's tricky, but you can do it, I promise you. Okay, so let's get to actually tuning. Oh, yeah, so important to note. Turn the pegs slowly, because you don't want them to break. You don't want them to, you don't want the string to break. You don't want it to be like, and then bing, and it turns, and then it's, snaps your string or whatever. The other thing to think about, as you are turning the peg, you always want to turn it so that it goes loose first and then to high. And that's just so that the friction isn't too tight when you're pushing to make it higher. And that's just something, again, to learn through experience. Okay, so let me show you an example here. This is going to be tricky to do with only one hand. I wish I had another stand next to me. But so I'm tuning an A. My A string is out of tune. It's telling me it's an A flat. Hold on, let me see if I can bring this a little closer so you can see. It's telling me it's an A flat. Maybe it is. And it's even a little low. You'll notice on the gauge it's a little low. So that means I have to raise the pitch up a bit. And so I'm going to do that by carefully turning the instrument towards me. And I have it, I don't know if you can tell, I have it kind of propped on my knees for the violins and violas. Cellos, you can probably just keep it on the floor. That'll be fine. You don't need to put it on your knees. So I'm going to take the tuning peg. Let's see if I can do this in a way that you can see. I'm going to take the tuning peg. When I turn it towards me, that's lowering the pitch. When I turn it away from me, that's raising the pitch, because it's tightening the string. And you can tell that by the winding. If you follow the winding, you can probably figure out if I turn it that way, hopefully they're all wound correctly. That's kind of scary. If it's backwards, pay attention to that. So, because occasionally that'll happen. But most of them should be fine. Okay, so now my A flat. I want my A string to be an A, but it's at an A flat, which means it's a little low. So I'm actually going to loosen my peg, just a little bit. I'm turning it towards me a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it back up. And then, ooh, that sounds close. So let me check on my tuner. So I loosened it, turned it up, and now I'm going to check on my tuner again. Okay, it's closer. So looks like I can raise it up a little more before I use the fine tuners. Okay, so I'm going to turn it up just a little more. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull it back towards me a little bit. And then I'm going to check it again. Now you may have noticed I did something there that I didn't really talk about. It's pretty close. So at that point, maybe I would start using my fine tuners. I don't have an A fine tuner on this violin, so at that point, maybe I would start fine tuning it. In this case, I'm going to continue using my tuning pegs. But there was something I did there that I didn't really point out, and this is the friction part. So when I loosened the string, it kind of, the friction became less tense. I'm able to turn it easily now. But as I tightened it, as I was turning it to tighten it again, to raise the string, I was also pushing in. I'm pushing in just a little bit so that as I'm going, the peg is, I don't know if I can demonstrate this very clearly with the paper, but you'll see and you'll get the hang of it as you go. But as I'm turning it away, I'm pushing in so that the peg goes in. So then it's getting tighter as well, and that way it can stay. If it isn't tight enough, it's going to quickly unravel. And this is the scary thing, because then your string is all like completely unwound and it's no good. Then it's super flat and super floppy, right? Now my string is all over the place. And if you do that, maybe it'll be okay. It's staying on my instrument, but sometimes it makes the other strings also pop out of tune. So that's really tricky. So just be very careful, be very slow. Maybe have your mom or dad kind of help you out the first few times so they can help with that dexterity needed. It really does take a lot of like kind of careful moving back and forth. Okay, the last little thing I wanted to point out about this was, yeah, so you're always going low to high, right? So if I'm aiming for an A, and even if it's a A sharp or a B, which means it's too high, then I'm actually going to lower it a little bit. I always kind of want to go below the A and then come back up to it, or whatever note I'm working on. In this case, I was holding it all with my hand, which makes it really tricky, but normally I would just have it laying on the desk, and then I can just pluck it and turn with one hand and watch the meter with the other hand. So you have a little more flexibility there. Okay, basses. This works just the same for you, except for your instrument uses gears instead of friction. So you actually have an easier time with this. Just put the app down, and then as you're tuning, play your note. If you can do it with a bow, it's always better, but if you need to pizzicato, that's okay. Your notes don't change as fast because your strings are so long and so big that you have to turn it a few times. You know, maybe I do kind of quarter turns at a time, just so I'm getting closer and closer. Just take your time. It'll be no problem for you. I think that's it. Oh, if your instrument is many strings are out of tune, you do have to kind of whittle away at it. So the trick here is, like, my A string is out of tune. I'm going to tune it up real quick. Pretend I'm using the app. Right? Okay, my A string's in tune, but let's say my D string was also out of tune. So now my A string, take a listen. It's still a little flat. Hold on. Alright, there's a good A. But now let's say my D string's out of tune and I go to raise it up. I may have to check. So I did my D string. Oh, my A string is now a little flat. So I have to redo my A string. And that might cause my D string to again be out of tune. And little by little, it's kind of like climbing up a ladder or something. Little by little, each string will get closer in tune. It's tedious and takes time. You'll get better at it every time you do it. And this is a great opportunity for you to learn this skill. If you are still having trouble, please email me. Maybe we can set up a time to, like over Zoom or something, we can actually do this face-to-face if you're really having trouble. But I actually think this is a great time for you to try to learn this by yourselves. Use me as a last resort. You can watch the video, you can use a tuning app, you can watch other tuning videos. I'm sure there's other people that have better ones and are a little more clear maybe. But I think that should get you through this process. Take your time, go slow, little by little. I think that's it. Oh, you know, the other thing I wanted to show you, if you are already more experienced with tuning, you can actually, on this app, you can also go to this tuning fork, and I don't know if you can hear that. So it's playing an A for me right now. And so maybe I want to not use the meter and not look at the meter. I want to actually tune by ear like we do in class when the A is playing on the TV. and then we play and try to get close to it. That's a good way to kind of tune up your ears and get closer to hearing it rather than just looking at the gauge. It's really good for you to learn that skill as well. Okay, that was a lot. I hope this sorted the tuning out for you. If you need to go, take a break, stop. You don't have to watch this whole thing in one sitting. But I tried to cover everything so that you can kind of get through it. Hey, best of luck to you all. Let's be in touch soon. Please keep those Seesaw posts coming up, and then we'll touch base again very soon. I hope you're all doing well. See you later.